Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you your forecast for the week of December 2nd through the 8th. In this channel, we talk about the astrological energy of the week ahead and how you can integrate it into your personal and spiritual growth. As always, let's recap a little bit of where we're coming from in order to understand where we are headed. On Sunday, December 1st, or actually Saturday, November 30th, we experience the new moon in Sagittarius. And as I mentioned in last week's video, this new moon in Sagittarius has a lot of energy behind it, but with Mercury retrograde in the mix, we are meant to still receive information about how we're going to move forward in this new expansive way. This new moon in Sagittarius marks the beginning of something that may feel foreign, that may feel, again, expansive, that is going to force us to grow in some way, shape, or form. But the Mercury retrograde that's in the mix, which is very active this week, by the way, is saying, okay, you need to first process a lot of the things that have been going on for you over the last couple of months that actually probably led you to this point, to this opportunity, to this decision that because of the level of growth that it can bring, it might feel a little scary. And maybe it isn't scary for some, but there is a little bit of trepidation. There is a little bit of hesitation. There is a little bit of, I want to, but I don't know what's on the other side of this, right? And that makes total sense because remember, the Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, when we look at it beyond just a Mercury retrograde where electronics, go berserk or we forget our keys, when we look at it beyond that, a Mercury retrograde is the opportunity, the remembering that we have to take a moment and be the observer of our situation, be the observer of our thoughts. In this case, to really step into the observer of who we are, our process, our lessons, and more importantly, our wisdom. This Mercury in Sagittarius is really asking us, how have my experiences in the past shaped and really given me some wisdom to who I am now, right? Because Sagittarius is the perpetual student, teacher, philosopher, seeker of the zodiac. It is a sign of the zodiac that reminds us life itself is a school. Life itself is the place where we learn everything we need to learn in order for us to evolve in accordance to the soul contract that we made here with certain situations, certain people, certain events in our lives, right? So a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius is the remembering, is the slowing down enough and remembering that wisdom that we all carry. What have past experiences taught me, and how do they inform me of what I'm capable of? Even if I don't understand what's on the other side of what's about to change or what's about to happen or what's about to begin in my life, how do I know, based on how much I have grown, again, especially in the last couple of months, of what I'm capable of and how I can hold this, how I can move through this, how I can manage this, right? We're also coming from a week in which Mars has really been stationed right before its retrograde, and Mars is going to retrograde this upcoming week. But when Mars is about to either go direct or retrograde, in this case retrograde, and it's at a station, it's at a halt. It's almost like an engine that's revved up and has nowhere to go. But you keep pressing the gas and you keep pressing the gas, and the rev gets louder and louder and louder. And if we are not mindful of how much we're revving an engine, right? Something can happen. There can be an explosion. There can be something that goes out of whack. One of the things I noticed last week between November 25th and December 1st is with the leading up to the new moon in Sagittarius, with the first week of Mercury retrograde and Mars station, there were a lot of news, right? At least in my circle, in my personal life, that kind of just blew my mind a little bit, right? friends going through things, friends sharing things with me, and really allowing me to put some, information in some gaps and some holes that I had, according to my knowledge about certain situations. For other friends, they were situations or things that happened in their life that felt really out of the blue, that were a little bizarre, that were very shocking and surprising. So I bring those examples here because they're quite literal, when you consider all of the energy that has been going on at the same time. So I don't know about you, but I went into the weekend of November 30th and December 1st feeling a little on edge. I've had to do more meditating, more grounding, more observing, more walking in order to remain as calm as possible because of the Mercury retrograde, and because Mercury retrograde has also had connections to Jupiter and Gemini. Again, I don't know about you, but thoughts, racing thoughts, limiting belief systems, what are the stories that are living in my head? Again, lots of meditation, lots of journaling. I have found myself journaling so much, and I am not an avid journaler. I think I've said it here before. I've said it to clients before. I'm not an avid journaler. And somehow the last 2 weeks, particularly last week, I found myself writing so much and feeling a lot of relief in that because I was able to get all of these racing thoughts out. Now, the week ahead has a lot of different dynamics, okay? But I think that at the end of the day, they are bringing a lot of illumination, missing information that you need before you move forward with certain plans, certain intentions. And I think a lot more acceptance as to where things are and where they are headed. So with that said, let's get started. Monday, December 2nd, we have Venus in Capricorn create a trine to Uranus in Taurus at 24 degrees each. I really love that we are beginning a pretty hectic week with this Earth energy, okay? A few things about this trine. So, on a more common interpretation of a trine between Venus and Uranus, this is about rebelling, going against the grain, going against what society deems is acceptable. This is especially true when Venus is involved with Uranus. So we're talking about themes around what does society deem as acceptable in terms of relating, in terms of how I make money, in terms of how I make a living, in terms of my relationship to responsibility, right? The relationship to myself. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that Venus is traversing the very last degrees of the sign of Capricorn, because Venus will move into Aquarius later this week, and I'll get to that in a second. But why does it matter that we understand that? Because Venus is going to eventually, at some point during this week, get to the 29th degree of Capricorn, where Pluto just recently left. This is really about the understanding of the relationship that we have with what we're leaving behind because Pluto just left. Pluto leaving the sign of Capricorn really drew a line on the sand as to how certain things are not going to ever be the same again in our lives. And with Venus transiting there, this is especially true with relationships. This is especially true with what we consider loyalty, with what we consider healthy detachment, right? And our own relationship with integrity, and how our own relationships, right, with other people reflect the integrity that we have with ourselves, our values in our life. It's a really interesting thing because the trine to Uranus and Taurus is saying this is actually liberating. If you remain in integrity with yourself, right? Venus represents our values. Capricorn is the sign of the zodiac that is concerned with integrity. If we remain in integrity with our own values, the trine to Uranus and Taurus says you are actually being freed, you are actually being liberated, you are actually creating space to come to your own community, to much more aligned relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships, business partnerships, especially because we're talking about Venus and Capricorn. I can see this trine being just overlooked as just another trine, but it's not. Because again, Venus is moving over the last couple of degrees of Capricorn, and we are really still somewhat confronting and coming face to face with what it is that we are letting go. On a more practical interpretation of this, Venus in Capricorn is about our relationship to our well-being, to how we make money, to how we make a living, to how we take care of ourselves. So if you're someone who's in the middle of looking for a job, or you're thinking about switching careers, especially with that trine to Uranus, which is the invitation to do something outside of the box, outside of the norm for you, the fact that both planets are in Earth signs, I get the feeling that the invitation to go outside of your own comfort zone is going to feel a lot more grounded. It's not something that you're going to feel pushed into or necessarily shoved into, I should say. It's more of an intentional decision, again, based on a lot of the things that you've learned the last couple of months. If this has nothing to do with you looking for a new job, thinking of changing careers, thinking about money or relationships, this can be a really beautiful internal recognition of your own growth. Venus trine Uranus is the invitation to love the parts of ourselves that make us different. It's the invitation to own those parts of us that make us different. And I'll touch more on those themes when I talk about Venus moving into Aquarius in a few minutes. Also on December 2nd, we have Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, trine Chiron in Aries. So considering the week that we are under, where Mercury retrograde is going to have a lot of connections, we might feel like we feel bombarded with more information, with more things to look at, with more things to take care of. And on the other hand, there can be a lot of clarity that comes our way. But Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius can feel frustrated, and the trine to Chiron is a very blunt energy. This is very much foot in your mouth type of energy, right? There's no tact, there's no filter. So being mindful of that, because with a Mercury retrograde, we have to understand that we are going to review anything that we agreed to, and more importantly, anything that we say. So we're going to come back to the things that we say. And if we unintentionally offend someone, do you really want to find yourself in that situation? But I can see how that can happen, because a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, trine Chiron in Aries, is also the courage with speaking your truth. The courage with saying, no, this is what I've learned. This is what I've learned about myself. This is the wisdom I have, and I want to share it. I think a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius particularly is the permission for so many people who may have been a little bit more timid in the past, weren't very secure about what they knew about life, about their subject, about what they do for a living. This is actually quite healing. And one of the things I notice when you're afraid to take up space in a room, you're afraid to take up space in a conversation, right? Or you're just afraid of taking up space in life, is that the way that we overcome that little by little is by speaking up, speaking our truth, right? Healing the part of us that fears rejection, because that's what Chiron in Aries is. It's the wound that comes with choosing yourself. And so the wound that can come with choosing yourself is the fear of rejection. If I am this bold, if I say this, I won't be liked, I won't be accepted, I will be deemed as dumb, right? One of the insecurities of Sagittarius energy is being perceived as unintelligent, right? Or not wise enough, or not know enough. And so this Mercury retrograde in Sag, I think, really brought to the forefront a lot of these things for people. And the trine to Chiron and Aries, which, by the way, we had this trine in November We're having it again the first week of December, and then we're having it again at the end of December. This is because Mercury went retrograde. And so this is a wound that we are healing. Another potential interpretation with this connection is that we can actually change our minds about things. Or maybe we realize that we thought about something in one way in November. And over the last couple of weeks, and now into December, and probably into January, we're going to see, oh, I didn't see things clearly. I was looking at this through the lens of fear and not through the lens of wisdom and possibility. I regret some of the things I said or some of the things that I agreed to in the past. So there is a little bit of that. And again, this week, because Mercury is so active, creating different connections to different planets, to different points, it can feel like a lot. So be mindful of your thoughts, slow down as much as you can. Be mindful of how much screen time you're having, especially before you go to bed, because the way that Mercury is going to behave this week, if you will, it can be one of those things where you're even thinking while you're sleeping. Have you ever experienced that? That you wake up slightly in the middle of the night and you feel like your mind is running? Yeah. So there is a lot that is trying to come to us right now. There are a lot of downloads happening right now. And so what we pay attention to is what is going to expand, is what is going to grow, right? Where attention goes, energy flows. Anything that you can do to practice mindfulness, you will find it so, so, so beneficial this week. And remember to slow down. Everything will get done. You just have to slow down enough to tackle one task at a time. We don't have much going on Tuesday, December 3rd, but on Wednesday, December 4th, we have a few things happening. So the first one being Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, creating an opposition to Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. I feel that I've talked about this opposition in the last couple of videos. And so we've talked about how Mercury and Sag and Jupiter and Gemini are in mutual reception to one another, right? This opposition happened once on November 18th, happens on December 4th, and will happen again on December 26th. Whenever we have Mercury retrograde make different connections, especially 3 connections to different planets, there is a story that is unfolding. So I invite you to think about what were some of the agreements that you made, some of the thoughts that you were having around November 18th, right? Or that week. What different understanding do you have about that now? How much more confident do you feel? Or perhaps what you were thinking then is not what is happening now. And it may feel like certain things are out of your control or out of your hands. It can be one of those moments where you're like, okay, this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be, or this isn't what I signed up for, or I underestimated the situation. I underestimated the details or how many steps the situation takes, right? But if we know that there's going to be a third opposition between Mercury and Jupiter at the end of December, all this means is that there's something here that is unfolding. Now, we have to keep in mind that if Mercury creates a connection to Jupiter, it's also going to create a connection to Saturn. And I'll talk about that in a second, but it's important to understand it because it's not just Mercury retrograde. It's not just Mercury retrograde in opposition to Jupiter and Gemini, which can feel like an exaggerated outlook on a situation. It can feel overwhelming. We have to keep in mind that this is still unfolding. And the connection that Mercury creates to Saturn is saying, not yet, not now. And I've been saying that for the last couple of videos, not yet, not now. I know you want to go faster. I know you want this process to go faster. I know you want things to be now, but not yet, not now. Wherever Saturn is involved and wherever Saturn is saying, not yet, not now, we have to listen because Saturn is father time. Saturn is the planet of karma. All that tells me is that there are things foundations, understandings, agreements, responsibilities that we are not yet aware of. And so we need to be patient. Wherever Saturn is involved, we have to be patient. We really have no other choice. Another thing between Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius opposing Jupiter retrograde in Gemini is that this can make the mental chatter even louder. Okay? This can make all of the voices sound really loud, all of the parts come up. It's a really great week for therapy, for coaching, for, again, grounding, anything that brings you back to present moment. Because if you are experiencing or you are in the middle of a transition right now, this can feel like you're drowning in all of the things that you have to do in the middle of this transition. I know a few people that are moving, that are looking for a place to live, that are going to start a new job, that are trying to figure out who's going to take care of their kids when they start this new job, and this is really new, and it's going to take up a lot of their time. So lots of little things, lots of thoughts, lots of to-do lists, and you have to mind the mental chatter, right? Remember, I talked about Saturn. Saturn invites us to be the observer in all of this. And so when we are the observer of all of the thoughts that are coming up, we can understand that there is also something else that is trying to leave. There is also a limiting belief system that is trying to be released. Anytime that any thoughts that come up that aren't in resonance with wholeness, with soul, with peace, you have to understand that that's not you, that that's not you at your core, that that's not you at your light. So when those things come up that are not light, you can observe them, you can hold them with love, you can hold them with compassion, and create healthy distance between who you really are and that part of you that is saying, this is overwhelming, this is hard, I changed my mind, right? It's still valid. It still has a lot of information, but coming back to the self is going to allow you to make a decision from that grounded self and not from the scattered brain, exaggerated, overwhelmed self. Big, big difference there. Also on December 4th, we have the Sun in Sagittarius create a square to Saturn in Pisces, both at 12 degrees. So in addition to a lot of fast-moving energy with Mercury retrograde being so active and wanting to do all the things and wanting to go to all the places and wanting to not miss out, making sure that they are everywhere, the Sun, which represents our energy, right? Our vitality, our ego, our presence, in square to Saturn, in a very literal way, this can make us feel physically tired. So it can be a week where we feel we're a little draggy, right? Because there's so much mental chatter as well. And it can feel like, oh my God, I have so much to do and not the physical energy to do it. Now, there can be something really great about that because a Sun square Saturn is how do I show up to my life, right? How do I show up to this expansion that I'm being invited into? Sun in Sagittarius, and the square to Saturn in Pisces is what's truly important? What am I saying yes to? How am I refining how I'm showing up? How am I consolidating? How am I simplifying my life? So in slowing down in that way, it's just to be much more mindful and much more observant of where you are putting your physical energy. This matters that much more because Mars is going to retrograde this week. So we have a very active mind. Saturn is saying you have to move slower, so it may feel like we're pushing against the grain of something. And Mars about to retrograde can add to the physical tiredness, right? This isn't to instill any type of limitation for you. It's just that I want you to understand all of the components that are at work. And by the way, astrological dates matter only so that we astrologers can deliver certain information to you, but it doesn't mean that certain things, certain events are going to happen on a specific date at a specific time. I wanted to bring this into this week's forecast because I've heard from a few people where it's like, I think there's an expectation for specific things to happen at specific times on specific dates. That's not how astrology works. As astrologers, we break things down day by day because, from a mathematical perspective, that's how things are happening. That's when things are happening. But when we look at the orb of degrees, this implies certain lessons, certain things that happen within a matter of a week, 2 weeks, a month, right? New moons and full moons have a manifestation period of 2 weeks each, right? And that's not even including the energetic window that they open of 6 months, especially new moons. I'm bringing this here because I think it's important to stop looking at astrology as the thing that is going to tell you what's going to happen and begin to using astrology as a tool for self-awareness, as a tool that reminds you of what you're thinking. So if you know that these energies are active all week, you can begin to be much more introspective about how does my body feel? What are the thoughts that are coming up? Why am I moving in the direction of that thing that I think that I want, right? What is the intention behind my action? What is the intention behind my words? That's where astrology really becomes a beautiful and powerful tool because we begin to pay much more attention to our relationship with life. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that in. Now, back to the Sun square Saturn. Anywhere where Saturn is involved, especially with a square, which is an aspect of tension, that is Saturn reminding us we're running a marathon, not a sprint. Whatever it is that you're trying to rush to, why are you trying to rush to it? What is the hurry, right? And so that can be very frustrating for someone who wants to get things done now. And the understanding of how little control you have and how divine that actually is. There are things you do not yet know. Can we be a little humble, right? And I say that because Mars in Leo is going to retrograde. And an unintegrated Mars in Leo is very arrogant, okay? And an unintegrated Sun in Sagittarius is also quite a know-it-all. So I'm bringing these themes, these descriptions in here because if they are active in the air, then they're probably pretty active in our behavior or the way that we are thinking about certain things and approaching certain situations. Also on December 4th, we have Venus in Capricorn sextile Neptune in Pisces. Okay, again, Venus is transiting the last couple of degrees of Capricorn. So we are somewhat reminiscing, still processing the relationship with certain things, certain people, certain relationships, certain situations that we are leaving behind. The sextile to Neptune in Pisces, I think, invites us to have so much compassion for ourselves because, and the lower expression of a Venus in Capricorn can be very judgmental. It can be, I should have known better. I wasted so much time. Why wasn't I more responsible with that? What happened? So we can be very, very harsh on ourselves about rigid expectations that keep us from understanding how valuable those lessons were to our journey. So the sextile to Neptune in Pisces actually reminded me of the Jack Kornfield quote, which says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Because it is an invitation to have compassion with others and where they're at and where they're able to meet you, especially if relationships have changed over the last couple of months. But you also have to have compassion with yourself. On another note, I think the sextile is beautiful energy to intuitively connect with the essence of your projects, of your work, especially if you are a creative, because Venus in Capricorn is very grounded and is saying, okay, this is, I want to finish this by the end of this week. And Neptune in Pisces is saying, how do you connect with that? So it's something that you channel. How do you connect with the essence of what wants to come through you so that it's not just a copycat of what someone else is doing, but it's actually something that is yours from your soul? And again, even though this energy perfects on December 4th, it's an energy that's active all week long because of the way that degrees work in astrology. Okay. So let's say that you don't have what you consider a creative job. This allows you to lean much more into the softness of accepting what is and where you are, and how valuable it is for your journey based on what you're learning. Okay. Thursday, December 5th, we have the inferior conjunction between the Sun in Sagittarius and Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius at 14 degrees. So this is already the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde. I don't know about you, but that feels really fast. And whenever we have an inferior conjunction, all this means is that the Sun comes together with Mercury retrograde. And the Sun, what it does is that it brings light to whatever it is that we have been working on, considering, reviewing, conversing, negotiating, right? The Sun illuminates. The Sun represents something, a bit of an aha moment, a bit of like, oh, this is what I was missing. This is the information that I was missing. So if you are in the middle of a process or a transition and you're kind of just waiting for answers from other people, this week can be the week where you begin to, receive the text, receive the documents, receive the emails. This is also from a perspective of just your internal process. I love the inferior conjunctions between the Sun and Mercury retrogrades because they do bring a different sense of understanding of the self. So if you watch my Mercury retrograde video, this Mercury retrograde is the invitation of the remembering of our own wisdom. And so this inferior conjunction this upcoming week can be one of those things where you really realize, yeah, I have to give myself more credit. I have to understand that whatever's on the other side of this decision, of this new chapter, of this transition, I can handle. I can do it. Sagittarius is the optimist of the zodiac, and really being optimistic, not just blind optimism, but because you have had enough experiences in your life that you have overcome. You have overcome, if you're watching this video, you have overcome every difficult situation that you have experienced thus far in your life. And this inferior conjunction with the Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius is about the true acknowledgement of that, the owning of that, and how empowering that actually is. On another note, just as a fun fact and something that you might want to jot down on your calendar somewhere, this Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius is going to coincide with Mars retrograde in Leo. So one of the cosmic lovers, which is Mars, is going to go retrograde while we have a Mercury retrograde. We're going to have the next Mercury retrograde in April that is going to coincide with the retrograde of Venus at the time, right? So that is the other half of the cosmic lovers. Why is this important? Because we have to pay attention to Mercury retrograde to Mercury retrograde. Every Mercury retrograde connects to the last and connects to the next. They have different cycles, they have different patterns. So some of the information that we come to understand right now, really through December, is going to somehow be useful to us come March. This Mars retrograde being one of the, one half of the cosmic lovers is going to inform us about the Venus retrograde that's coming in March. When the cosmic lovers retrograde, Venus and Mars coincide with the Mercury retrograde, to me, there is a redefining of how we are integrating the masculine and feminine within us, redefining of how we want to do our relationships. There is a reconsideration of, especially because right now Venus is in Capricorn, of what feels honest to us. Are we going to continue doing relationships in a traditional way? This is a much larger theme, right? Because I'm looking at things from a little bit of a more expansive timeline here, but I think that it's important that you understand that because no astrological event is isolated from the previous or the next. On Friday, December 6th, we have Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, square Saturn in Pisces at 13 degrees. This is another configuration that Mercury is connecting to. I talked about it a few moments ago with the square to Saturn. This is the energy of not just yet. You don't have all the information yet. I know you want to move faster. I know you want to push this harder. Not just yet. So the first time that this happened was November 12th. Then it happens again December 6th. And then it happens again December 26th. So again, by the end of December, we will have more answers, more clarity. This week, yes, brings information, brings a bit of an aha moment with that inferior conjunction. And still, we might feel like, but I can't move forward just yet. Because the illumination, right, or the aha moment, or the additional information that we have been waiting for that we needed, will bring with it a little bit of reformatting, restructuring, reconsidering as to how to move forward because of this Saturn in Pisces. Appreciate the delays, appreciate the pace at which things are moving at, appreciate a no. I think that a Mercury square Saturn, and the Sun is also squaring Saturn this week, can come with some no's for some people. You were hoping that someone would say yes. You were hoping that you would get that opportunity. You were hoping for something, and the square to Saturn might be like, no, you have to trust divine timing and you have to trust divine intervention. Saturn is the planet of karma. So what does that mean? That Saturn is always paying attention to the seeds that we've planted, to how hard we have worked. And a lot of times our ego thinks that we need to be in a certain place, we need to be rewarded in a certain way, we need to be around certain people because that then determines success, or that then implies that we have done a good job. And wherever Saturn is involved, especially when Saturn brings a no, we have to appreciate it because there is something greater working. Our karma has to do with the energetic seeds that we have planted in the past. And so when we're talking about this from an energetic frequency perspective, we have to remember that we don't belong everywhere and that's okay, because what we're thinking about now is what energetically connects with me. What is the frequency of the types of people that I want to be around, that I want to work with, the projects that I want to work on, the type of job that I want to have? All of that is frequency. And so where Saturn is involved, Saturn wants to deliver something tangible. It wants you to manifest something really beautiful, but you have to be patient. And so a no from Saturn is divine intervention from the universe. So just keep that in mind as well. Also on December 6th, Mars in Leo begins its retrograde at 6 degrees Leo, and it will remain retrograde till February 23rd, at which point it will go direct at 17 degrees Cancer. You want to pay attention to the Leo Cancer parts of your chart. I have a whole video on Mars retrograde, what that means. So I invite you to look at that. I don't want to repeat myself on here too much, but just keep in mind, Mars retrograde in Leo will be about what is my relationship to what matters to me? What is my relationship to the things that I love, right? What is worth fighting for? How confident do I feel to move forward with certain things that right now might look a lot differently, right? Than what I thought a few months ago. Because I really invite you to think about who and where you were at the beginning of 2024 and who and where you are at the end. And considering everything that has happened this year, everything that has happened in between, I think this Mars retrograde is actually a gift. Don't get me wrong. My least favorite retrograde are Mars retrogrades. It's just my least favorite. And because I understand that the cosmos is always working in my favor, I actually think that we do need to slow down even more because who we are now still needs to be integrated into our bodies, into our nervous system, into the way we think, into the way that we perceive the world. That's why Mercury is also retrograde. So it's about asking us, what are the intentions behind my actions? What are the intentions behind that thing that I want to go after, that I want to move towards? Who am I, right? Who is the me that is showing up to this? Am I looking at this through the lens of my wound or through the lens of my wisdom? The weekend of December 7th and December 8th is also pretty active. So on December 7th, Venus leaves the sign of Capricorn and moves into the sign of Aquarius and remains there till January 2nd. And what is the first thing that Venus does as she moves into Aquarius? It creates a conjunction to Pluto, newly entered in Aquarius. This is a Venus-Pluto conjunction at 0 degrees. So here we've had the whole week to consider, right, what the relationship is to our life now, what the relationship is to our own foundations in life are now, what they are now. And as soon as Venus moves into Aquarius, there is an invitation to really consider how in the last 4 to 6 weeks we have been shown where we no longer belong, with what types of people, what groups of people we no longer want to be a part of. Because Venus in Aquarius is the invitation to own all of the weird stuff and all of the things that we may have had some shame around in the past, and really own it and really say, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I like to talk about. I like to talk about aliens. And if we can't talk about aliens, well, I don't know what to tell you because I think it's real, right? So it is about owning the part of yourself that has been suppressed for so long. A Venus-Pluto conjunction can be very empowering. A Venus-Pluto conjunction, especially in Aquarius, especially in this era that we're moving into, is saying there's no turning back. I have seen the parts of myself that have been wanting to emerge for so long. And because of societal structures, standards, judgments, I have held that part of myself back. I have not taken up space. I have been a wallflower. No more of that. And it's a really beautiful understanding because really what we're stepping into here is the understanding that we, in fact, show people how to love us by the way that we love ourselves. And if those interactions come with certain people not agreeing with who we are, not agreeing with what we do, finding us a little weird, whatever it is, then again, we can thank our lucky stars and say, that's just not meant for me. That's spirit redirecting me, guiding me to where I do belong, to where my people are. Because Aquarius is the sign of community, the sign of community that allows you to be you for who you are. An unintegrated Aquarius energy is very cliquey and very tribal. And that's not what we're talking about here. Aquarius energy and unintegrated Aquarius energy can be like mean girl type of energy. So I say this because Venus in conjunction to Pluto can also bring forth information of how people may be behaving in that way in your own life. And so again, because this week has the potential to bring revelation to you, you can begin to see people if they're cliquey or they're tribal. It's like, I don't want that because that means that I still have to be a certain way to belong. And that's not the point of a Venus in Aquarius. An integrated Venus in Aquarius is about owning who you are, loving who you are, and being at peace and being okay and accepting if someone else doesn't agree. There is something about Aquarius energy in a more spiritual expression that is the peace and the joy that comes with being. No, there's no judgment of who's better, who's worse, who's right, who's wrong. There's just a lot of clarity of this is just who we are. And that creates a collective. So be very mindful of that, because I think that this Venus in Aquarius in particular, till January 2nd, is going to be a really interesting one. I think it's going to continue solidifying through the month of December, the types of connections and relationships that we want to have in our lives, the way that we want to connect with ourselves. On a more practical interpretation of this for a lot of people can bring about, you know what, I want to change my look. I want to dress differently. I want to be more me. I want my external reality to reflect who I have now become. And this isn't coming from a superficial place at all. We have to understand how significant the shifts that we have encountered this year are, how much they have changed us. And so inevitably, when we change from within, a lot of things change without, as within, so without. And so there might be a new trend. You might decide that you want to color your hair pink. You might decide that you want to do something very outside of yourself, very outside of what people have known you for. So it can be fun energy if that's how you want to use it. But remember, this is about a much more genuine expression of who you are, and how everything else in your life is also going to reflect that. Also on December 7th, we have the Sun in Sagittarius create an opposition to Jupiter retrograde in Gemini at 16 degrees. So I remind you, the Sun has squared Saturn, Mercury has squared Saturn, Mercury has opposed Jupiter, and now the Sun is opposing Jupiter. So our identity, our ego, and our minds are changing because they're connecting with these outer planets. They're connecting with Jupiter and Saturn. They're connecting with the part of us that wants to grow and expand and do the things now, which is Jupiter and Gemini. And they're connecting with Saturn, which is saying, just one moment, not yet. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, very practical interpretation of Sun opposition to Jupiter, clarity in negotiations, clarity in research. Perhaps you finally hone in on something that you have been researching for several weeks. You gain answers from people, you get emails from people. Another potential interpretation of this, especially with the Sun in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Gemini, even though it's retrograde, those are very social signs. This is a great weekend for celebrations, holiday parties, being around people that are light and joyful and you just want to chit chat with. This doesn't strike me as the weekend where we're going to have deep, profound conversations with people, unless that's more of your nature and that's everybody who you hang out with and have a ball. But this is just lighter energy. And I think that by the end of the week, we can feel a little tired, right? Mentally or physically. And we are going to want to keep things a little lighter. We are going to want to have some fun, have some, really experience some joy in our lives, because there's a lot that's coming, especially if we're paying attention. One potential pitfall with this energy is the exaggeration of things. Sun in Sagittarius opposition to Jupiter in Gemini, the exaggeration of certain events, of a conversation, of things that were said that we're not supposed to know. So again, be mindful of the information that you're receiving, right? Whether it's from the internet, from your phone, from friends, from people. Check your sources. Ask yourself, what do I think about this? How does this fit into my life? How does this land for me? Does it feel true for me? Does it feel honest to my own experience? And that weekend can have a much different tone to it. Also taking place on the weekend of December 7th and 8th is that Neptune is going to go direct in Pisces. Neptune has been retrograde in Pisces since July 2nd. Now, Neptune is such a slow-moving planet, and especially in Pisces, these are messages that have come through us, again, through mindfulness, through meditation, through slowing down, through therapy, through coaching, through introspection. It is a very introspective energy that is telling us that there are much, much more profound, deeper truths within us than outside of us. So, some of the questions that I invite you to think about as Neptune goes direct is, what have I learned about compassion between July and now? Whether it's compassion to another, compassion to myself. I think this is a big one, especially considering everything that has happened in relationships. What have we learned about our connection to the divine and to the universe, to our own intuition, right? What have we learned about the interconnectedness to others, especially spiritually? This question I find especially important considering all of the things that are happening all over the world. And I think there is still a lot of denial and rejection to the truth that we are all connected no matter where we are. And I think that this Neptune retrograde in Pisces has made that very, very clear, very subtly in the background of a lot of worldly events unfolding. And so that becomes something that we consider as we continue to move into this Pluto and Aquarius era. Okay. So this forecast is a little bit longer than normal, but there's a lot happening. I think there's a ton of opportunity to, even if you don't get the answers or the insight that you need from sources outside of you, there is a ton that gets to come from within. A lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, a lot of acceptance. And I really invite you to make room and space for that, because those are the answers that truly matter, especially when you're about to make big decisions in your life, when you're going through transitions, when it comes to having compassion and love for yourself. Okay. As always, may this be of service. So much love to you, and I will talk to you next week.